The dim light of the desk lamp cast strange shadows on the wall of the room where Rebecca Sanders was filling out the motel guest register. Her fingers automatically filled in the blanks. Last name, date of arrival, passport number. Her thoughts were far away, at home, where something elusive but disturbing had been happening for the past 3 months. Adam had changed, not abruptly or suddenly, slowly, like snow melting in spring. Back in February, they had laughed together over dinner, discussing funny stories from his workday. The school bus he drove was a source of endless anecdotes about children's antics. Now, however, her husband was staying late more and more often, citing unscheduled staff meetings or the need to prepare the bus for the route. There was a knock at the door, the night shift. Rebecca glanced at the clock in surprise. It was already 9 o'clock. She had been so lost in her thoughts that she hadn't noticed the time passing. Quickly gathering her things and handing over her work to a colleague, she headed for her car. The cool April air refreshed her head. On her way home, Rebecca stopped at the supermarket. The refrigerator needed restocking. In the dairy section, she ran into Mrs. Parker, a primary school teacher. "Rebecca, dear, how are you? I haven't seen you at school meetings for a long time. You used to pick up Adam after work quite often," the elderly woman chirped. "A lot of work at the motel," Rebecca smiled tensely, "and Adam is staying late these days." "Late?" Mrs. Parker raised her eyebrows in surprise. "I've seen him leaving right after the last bus, around 4 for a week now." Rebecca felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. Her husband had come home at 8 the night before, claiming he had to take the bus in for an unscheduled maintenance check. She said goodbye to the teacher mechanically and headed for the cash register, forgetting half of what she had come for. At home, Rebecca found the usual scene. Adam was sitting in front of the TV, engrossed in a baseball game. There was an empty beer bottle on the coffee table. In the past, she would have commented on the game and sat down next to him. Now she silently went to the kitchen to unpack the groceries. "I ran into Mrs. Parker today," she said casually as she put the groceries away. "Really? How was she?" Adam replied, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Fine. She asked why I don't stop by to pick you up after work anymore." The room fell silent, interrupted only by the commentator's voice. Then footsteps could be heard. Adam appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Listen, I know I've been staying late lately. It's just a lot of work. New safety regulations, paperwork." Rebecca looked at her husband, a large, awkward man with a kind face and a guilty look. The same look he had given her 12 years ago when he forgot their first wedding anniversary. Now, there was something different in that look that she hadn't noticed before. "Of course, I understand," she replied, closing the refrigerator door. The evening passed as usual, dinner accompanied by the low murmur of the television, a few routine remarks about the day. Rebecca noticed her husband's new shirt, dark blue with a small check pattern. He hadn't worn anything like that before. She remembered their shopping trip 3 years ago, when Adam had flatly refused to try on those dandy rags. She lay awake for a long time that night, listening to her husband's steady breathing. Fragments of memories swirled in her head: how they met at his mother's library, their first date at an ice cream parlor, their wedding in a small church on the outskirts of town. 12 years, that's not so short. Enough to learn to read between the lines, notice little things, sense insincerity. In the morning, getting ready for work, she lingered in front of the mirror. 34 years old, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes were becoming more noticeable, and gray hairs were showing in her chestnut hair. She was still attractive, but time was taking its toll. Maybe that was it? Rebecca pushed the unwelcome thought away. No, something else was going on in their lives, and she was determined to find out what it was. Kira Holt stood at the entrance to the Locon hair salon, looking at the worn sign and the peeling paint on the doorframe. It wasn't the most presentable place, but it would do for a start. The heavy bag with her tools weighed heavily on her shoulder. The scissors inside jingled when she pushed the door open. The bell above the entrance rang melodiously. The room greeted her with the smell of hairspray and sickly air freshener. A heavy-set woman in her 50s sat behind the reception desk, leafing through a worn magazine. "Good morning. I'm the new stylist." Kira flashed her signature smile. The woman looked up and gave her an appraising glance. Light jeans, a white blouse, and elegant low-heeled shoes. Kira had carefully chosen her outfit, striking a balance between professionalism and attractiveness. "Ah, you're the one from Portland. Martha warned me. Come in, I'll show you to your place." Her work chair was by the window, the only advantage of her position. Kira laid out her tools and adjusted the mirror. Her own face flashed in the reflection. A little tired after the move, but still fresh. 26 was the perfect age to start over. The first customer arrived around 10, an elderly man who needed a simple haircut. A young girl came in next to have her ends trimmed. By lunchtime, Kira had settled into the small space of the salon. The bell rang, signaling the arrival of a new visitor. A tall man in a uniform shirt was reflected in the mirror. He stood uncertainly at the entrance, clearly feeling out of place. "Can I help you?" Kira turned around and met his gaze. "Yes, I need a haircut." He ran his hand through his unkempt hair. "Have a seat." She pointed to the chair. "What's your name?" "Adam. Adam Sanders." Throwing a cape over him, Kira noticed his broad shoulders and strong neck. He wasn't handsome, but there was something about him, a certain solidity, reliability. "I haven't seen you here before," he said, looking at her in the mirror. "I just started today. I moved here from Portland." "Oh, I see. I'm here a lot. I drive a school bus, and the route goes by here." Kira smiled as she worked with the comb. His hair was thick and unruly. "The kids are probably noisy?" "Sometimes, but I'm used to it. I've been doing this for 8 years." The conversation flowed slowly, about the city, work, the weather. Kira was a good listener, inserting short comments and questions at just the right moments. Gradually, Adam relaxed and began telling funny stories about his young passengers. "Do you have a family?" she asked, brushing the cut hair off his shoulder. "Yes, a wife. No children yet." Something in his voice made her prick up her ears. A slight hesitation, a barely perceptible note. Of regret? Dissatisfaction? "All done," she said, taking off her peignoir. "How do you like it?" Adam scrutinized his reflection, turning his head from side to side. "Excellent. I haven't had such a good haircut in a long time." He hesitated a little with the change. Their fingers accidentally touched as she took the money. Adam blushed slightly. "So you work here full-time now?" he asked as he reached the door. "Yes, Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 7. "Well then, see you next time." The bell rang again. Kira watched her customer through the window. Adam walked toward a yellow school bus parked across the street, his shoulders straight and his hand running through his freshly cut hair. "Don't get involved," said the manager. "He's married." Kira turned around, raising an eyebrow. "I'm just doing my job." "Yeah, right," the woman snorted, returning to her magazine. The day went on as usual. Customers came and went, but Kira kept glancing at the road whenever the school bus passed by. Once, she thought she saw Adam wave at her. In the evening, as she closed the salon, she mentally reviewed the events of the day. A small town where everyone knows each other. Maybe it wouldn't be so boring here, especially if some of the customers started coming in more often. At the bus stop, waiting for the bus to take her to her rented apartment, Kira took out her phone and opened her notes. There was a new entry in her schedule for the following week. Adam Sanders, Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. Dinner was cooling on the kitchen table. Macaroni casserole, Adam's favorite dish. Rebecca mechanically wiped the plates, glancing at the clock. It was well past 8 and her husband was still not home. The phone was silent. A fork clattered loudly in the sink. Rebecca grimaced at the sharp sound and turned off the water. Lately, everything had been annoying her. The creaking floorboards, the humming refrigerator, even the birds chirping outside the window. She sat down at the table, absent-mindedly propping her head up with her hand. That morning, while sorting through the laundry basket, she had found her husband's shirt, the dark blue plaid one. A faint but distinct scent wafted from the collar. Women's perfume, definitely not hers. Rebecca remembered the scent well, sweet, with a hint of vanilla. The same scent trailed behind the new hairdresser from Locona when she came to their motel to rent a room for the time being. The front door creaked. There was a commotion in the hallway. Adam was taking off his shoes, dropped something, and cursed. "I'm home!" His voice sounded exaggeratedly cheerful. "Sorry I'm so late. I had to stop by the car wash. The bus was covered in mud." Rebecca watched silently as her husband sat down at the table and leaned over his plate. His hair was perfectly styled. Strange for someone who had supposedly just washed a bus. "Delicious," he muttered with his mouth full. "Aren't you going to eat?" "I already did." Adam shrugged and continued his dinner. In the past, he would have asked her how her day was and told her about his young passengers. Now, it was as if a wall of unspoken words and awkward silence had grown between them. "You know, I think I'm going to get a haircut next week," Rebecca said casually. Adam's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Really? Why now?" "I've been meaning to for a while. I heard there's a new stylist at Locon. She seems pretty good." "I don't know. I haven't paid attention," he said, looking away. "Really? I thought you got your hair cut there recently." There was a pause. Adam studied the pattern on his plate with exaggerated attention. "Oh yes. Right. I completely forgot." Rebecca got up from the table and went to the window. Twilight was falling outside and lights were coming on in the neighboring houses. A dog barked somewhere. "You've been staying late a lot lately," she said without turning around. "A lot of work. You know how it is. Spring, inspections, technical inspections." "And do you have to wash the bus often?" "What? Your bus? Do you wash it often? Listen, I'm tired. Let's not what, Adam?" He sighed heavily and pushed his plate away. "Rebecca, please. I'm really exhausted. Maybe we should watch a movie." She turned around. Her husband sat slumped, avoiding her gaze. Wrinkles she hadn't noticed before appeared at the corners of his eyes. When had they both grown so old? "Sure, pick whatever you want." The evening passed in the usual routine, a vague action movie on TV, a couple of cans of beer for Adam, a cup of herbal tea for her. They sat at opposite ends of the sofa, and the distance between them seemed greater than ever. Rebecca tossed and turned for a long time that night. Adam snored loudly next to her, sometimes muttering something unintelligible. Once, she thought she heard him say someone's name, but she couldn't make it out. In the morning, getting ready for work, she took her favorite dress out of the closet, dark green, which brought out the color of her eyes. It was a little tight around the waist. She should start exercising. The mirror reflected a tired woman with a dull look in her eyes. At work, Rebecca kept checking her phone. Adam usually sent her messages throughout the day. Funny pictures, short, "How are you?" messages, photos of particularly amusing moments from his trips. Now her phone was silent. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she saw the familiar yellow bus driving past the motel. Adam was behind the wheel, but he didn't even turn his head toward her window. The bus was clean. No trace of the dirt her husband had mentioned yesterday. In the evening, sorting through the laundry, she came across the shirt with the scent of perfume again. This time, Rebecca carefully folded it and put it aside. Maybe she should pay a visit to Locon. It was high time to take care of herself. And at the same time, she could get to know the new hairdresser better. The spring sun shone through the blinds of the hair salon. Kira ran a comb through the hair of her next customer, her gaze returning to the clock on the wall every few seconds. It was 1:45. Adam should be here soon. His visits had become more frequent over the last month. At first he came once every 2 weeks, supposedly to trim his sideburns. Then he started coming in every week, to trim his bangs or freshen up the back of his hair. The receptionist, Marta, just rolled her eyes, but she dutifully made a note in the logbook. The bell rang at 2 o'clock sharp. Adam entered, tugging at his uniform shirt as usual. A slight smile played on his face, the same as last time, and the time before that. "Hello, I'd like—" "Have a seat." Kira waved her hand toward her chair. "A trim again?" Their fingers touched as she threw on her peignoir. Adam flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Their eyes met in the mirror, just for a moment, but it was enough to make the air between them thick and heavy. "How's the root?" she asked, splashing water on his hair. "Same old. The kids are noisy, the parents are complaining about the schedule. And at home." Pause. The scissors clicked in the silence. "Fine." Kira knew what that meant. In a month of conversations, she had learned all his intonations. Fine meant another silent dinner, unspoken complaints, a night spent on opposite sides of the bed. "You know," she lowered her voice, even though they were alone in the salon except for Martha, who was dozing over a magazine, "I finish at 7 tonight." Adam swallowed. His Adam's apple twitched under the white shaving cream. "I have a couple of hours after my last flight. We could grab a coffee. There's a place on the outskirts." They met at a small coffee shop where no one knew their names. Adam was nervous, constantly glancing at the door. His fingers twirled his cup, hesitating to touch the cooling Americano. "Relax," Kira covered his hand with hers. "There's no one here. I'm sorry, it's just, this is all so new to me." "I know." She really did know. She saw his restlessness, felt his guilt, but she also saw the hunger in his eyes, the hunger of a man who had lived someone else's life for too long. "Tell me about yourself," she asked. "The real you, not the person everyone thinks you are." And he told her about his childhood with his domineering mother, a librarian, about how he married Rebecca, a sweet girl who worked in the reading room, about how year after year he grew into the role of the model husband, the school bus driver, the man who was right in every way. "What do you want for yourself?" The question hung in the air. A car drove by, its headlights illuminating their faces for a second. "I want to be free," he finally said. "At least sometimes." Their first kiss happened in the parking lot near the coffee shop. It was awkward, hurried, with a taste of coffee and guilt. Kira could feel his heart pounding. Their meetings became regular, 2 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays after the last bus. Sometimes they just sat in the coffee shop, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they walked along deserted streets on the outskirts of the city. Once they drove to a lake outside the city. Adam told his wife that the bus had broken down. Kira had no illusions. She knew that for him, it was a breath of fresh air, nothing more. He would never leave his wife, never abandon his proper life. But she didn't need anything more. Everything remained the same in the salon. He came in for a haircut, and they exchanged pleasantries. Martha stopped rolling her eyes. She had gotten used to it. Only once did she catch their eyes in the mirror and shake her head. "You do realize this can't last forever, right?" she asked Kira after closing time. "Of course," Kira said, wiping her tools. "But while it lasts, why not?" That evening she stood in the shower for a long time, washing the scent of his cologne from her skin. A message flashed on her phone. "Thanks for today. It meant a lot to me." She didn't reply. Some things are better left unsaid, especially when you live a double life in a small town where everyone knows each other, and secrets don't last longer than the morning dew. Kira's rented apartment was on the third floor of a rundown building on the outskirts of town. It was a small studio with a view of the parking lot and trash cans, not where she had planned to be at 26. Kira sat on the windowsill, thoughtfully sipping wine from a plastic cup. Another message from Adam lit up her phone, something about how much he missed her. She grimaced and put her phone aside. On the table was a stack of printouts, job ads for beauty salons in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. The small town was just a stopover, a breather, a stepping stone to something bigger. Getting up from the windowsill, she walked over to the mirror. She carefully combed her blonde hair and touched up her lips. She smiled at her reflection, the same smile that worked so well on her clients, especially married men going through a midlife crisis. Adam wasn't the first. In Portland, there was James, the car dealership owner who had promised her the moon. Before him, there was Michael from Boise, a successful lawyer whose wife spent too much time at the country club. They were all the same, looking for something in her that they couldn't find at home. There was a knock at the door. It was her neighbor, an elderly woman from the first floor. "Sweetheart, do you have any sugar?" Kira instantly put on a friendly mask. "Of course, Mrs. Baker. Come in." While she poured sugar into the jar her neighbor had brought, the woman looked around the apartment with a keen eye. "Aren't you afraid living alone in a neighborhood like this?" "What are you talking about? I'm used to it. Besides, it's only temporary." "Temporary?" The old woman pricked up her ears. "Yes, I'm planning to move to a big city. There are more opportunities there." "But what about your salon? I hear you already have regular customers." Kira smiled to herself. News travels fast in small towns. There's work everywhere. The main thing is not to stand still. After seeing her neighbor out, she returned to her printouts. A salon in downtown Seattle was looking for an experienced stylist. The salary was 3 times higher than her current one, a rental apartment not far from work, the opportunity to make useful acquaintances. Her phone vibrated again. This time Adam had sent a photo of the sunset over the lake where they had met last week. Kira deleted the message without opening it. He had been helpful, helping her settle into the city and make connections. His wife worked at the only motel in town and knew all the local gossips. Through her, you could find out anything about anyone in town. But Kira had no intention of getting attached to him. Water dripped from a faulty tap in the bathroom. Kira mechanically applied night cream to her face, going over her plans in her mind. In 3 months, she would have saved enough to move. By then, the affair with Adam would have grown stale. She knew from experience that it was impossible to keep such men interested for long. In the morning, she put on her usual smile and went to the salon. Martha greeted her with her usual grumbling, her calendar covered with client appointments. At lunchtime, Rebecca Sanders popped in, supposedly to make an appointment for a haircut. Kira noticed how she sniffed her perfume and studied her movements. Wives always sense these things. It's an instinct that defies explanation. "You have such beautiful hair," Kira said, professionally running her fingers through the chestnut strands. "I think a short haircut would suit you. It would give you a more modern look." Rebecca looked at her in the mirror with an unreadable expression. "Maybe. I'll think about it." In the evening, as she closed the salon, Kira mentally calculated her assets. Money in the bank, several sets of expensive clothes bought as gifts for past clients, connections in several cities. Not bad for a girl from a trailer park in Idaho. At home, she pulled a worn album from under her bed. The photos showed her as a child, a skinny, freckled girl in a worn dress. Her mother, with her perpetually tired face. Her father, whom she had seen only a couple of times in her life. "Never," she whispered to her reflection in the mirror. "I'll never be like them." At dinner, Rebecca watched Adam pick at his plate of chicken. He used to eat double helpings, but now he barely touched his food. His gaze was fixed on something beyond the wall, as if another, more interesting world was hidden behind the faded wallpaper. "Mom called today," Rebecca said, breaking the silence. "She asked why we hadn't visited in a while." Adam flinched as if he had been awakened from a pleasant dream. "Helen, what did you say?" "That we're busy, that you have a lot of work." He nodded, returning to his plate. The clock in the kitchen ticked, an old one, a wedding gift from his mother-in-law. Its steady beat seemed to count down the time left until the inevitable. Adam's phone vibrated. He reached for his pocket but stopped himself. Rebecca pretended not to notice the movement, just as she hadn't noticed the new shirts disappearing from the closet, the strange smell coming from his clothes, the receipts from the coffee shop on the outskirts of town. "You know," she said, getting up to clear the table, "I made an appointment at the hair salon. The new one." The plate in Adam's hands clattered against the table a little louder than necessary. "Really? When?" "Next week. They say she's good." There was silence on the line. Rebecca knew this tactic. Her mother-in-law knew how to wait for the other person to start talking. "Helen, I have to go. I have laundry to do." "All right, dear. But remember, I'm always here for you." Rebecca hung up and leaned against the wall. Muffled laughter from the audience of some sitcom drifted in from the living room. Adam was watching comedies more and more often, another way to escape reality. That evening, when they went to bed, Rebecca felt her husband move away to his side of the bed. He had always hugged her before going to sleep, but now it was as if an invisible barrier had come between them. In the morning, she found a long strand of light-colored hair on the bathroom floor. Her hair was dark. At work, Rebecca mechanically filled out the logbook. The numbers and letters blurred before her eyes. At lunchtime, she walked to the hairdresser's, just to walk by, to look in the window. Kira was standing by her chair, laughing at someone's joke. Her laughter was clear and infectious, the kind of laughter that only young women who are confident in their power over men have. Adam came home late that evening, smelling of coffee and someone else's perfume. He didn't even try to come up with another excuse. He just went to the shower and then straight to bed. Rebecca sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring out the dark window. In the reflection, she saw herself, a tired, middle-aged woman with wrinkles around her eyes and gray hair. Behind her loomed the shadow of their marriage, once strong but now crumbling like a house of cards. Adam's phone vibrated again, silently, but the screen lit up the bedroom ceiling. He reached for the nightstand, thinking she was asleep. Rebecca closed her eyes, listening to his breathing. It quickened as he read the message. That morning she had found a receipt from the same coffee shop on the outskirts in his jacket pocket. 2 cappuccinos, 15:30, the time of his unscheduled maintenance. The day at the motel was unusually quiet. The guests had left early in the morning, and no new ones were expected. Rebecca was sitting at the front desk, mindlessly flipping through an old magazine, when the front door opened. Kira Holt looked flawless, even at 10 in the morning. Her hair was done. She wore light makeup and a form-fitting dress. She smiled the same smile Rebecca had seen in the hairdresser's window. "Good morning. I'd like to pay for my room for last week." Rebecca silently opened the guest book. Martha, the night clerk, had written in illegible handwriting. The check-in time was smudged, but the date was clearly visible. Tuesday, the day of the school bus inspection. "Did you enjoy your stay?" Her own voice sounded distant. "Oh yes, it's very cozy. A little lonely, though," Kira winked. "It's nice that the staff here are so understanding." Rebecca punched the receipt. Her hands moved automatically. Years of work had turned these actions into a reflex. Fragments of memory swirled in her head. Adam's new shirt, receipts from the coffee shop, the smell of perfume. "You know," Kira leaned against the counter, "I think I'll stop by again this week, if there's a room available." "What day are you planning to come?" "Thursday, around 4. After Kira left, Rebecca sat motionless for a long time. A yellow school bus drove by outside the window. Adam was taking the children on another field trip. He didn't even turn his head toward the motel. At lunchtime, she stopped by Locon, pretending to reschedule her hair appointment. Martha, the salon administrator, was chewing on something at her desk. "Is Kira working today?" "No, she's off. She always takes Thursdays off after lunch." Rebecca nodded and left. It was sunny outside, but she felt chilly. She walked to a small cafe on the corner and ordered a coffee. The hot drink burned her throat, but she couldn't stop shivering. She returned home earlier than usual. In the bedroom, she pulled out the bottom drawer of the dresser where Adam kept his documents. Among the papers, she found the bus inspection form. The actual inspection had been carried out a month ago. Her phone vibrated, a message from her mother-in-law. Helen wanted to know if they were coming over for the weekend. Rebecca imagined their family dinner, forced smiles, awkward pauses, her mother-in-law's piercing gaze, noticing every false note. In the kitchen, she mechanically began to prepare dinner. She chopped vegetables and put the meat in the oven. The familiar actions helped her not to think, not to imagine how her husband was spending his time in a cheap motel with a young hairdresser. Adam returned home. He smelled of fresh cologne, not the one she had given him for his birthday. He kissed her on the cheek and went to take a shower. A kiss like that used to warm her heart, but now it felt like a slap in the face. During dinner, she watched her husband. How he avoided her gaze, how he fiddled with his napkin, how he glanced at his watch. I wonder if he managed to arrange the next meeting with Kira. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine. I took the third grade to the museum." "What about the car inspection? When's the next one?" The fork clattered against the plate. Adam froze for a moment, then continued eating as if nothing had happened. "Next month, I think." Rebecca nodded and got up from the table. Their portrait on the wall was reflected in the kitchen window, a wedding photo from 12 years ago. Young, happy, confident in their eternal love. Now she knew the truth. She knew about the motel meetings, the coffee dates, the false excuses. All that remained was to decide what to do with this knowledge. Adam was already asleep in the bedroom, or pretending to be asleep. His phone vibrated quietly on the nightstand. Rebecca didn't bother to look at the message. She already knew who it was from. In the morning, as she was getting ready for work, she looked at herself in the mirror closely for the first time in a long time. The woman on the other side of the glass looked different, as if the burden of ignorance had been lifted from her shoulders, leaving behind a bitter but sobering clarity. Kira sat in her small apartment, staring at another message from Adam. It was long, full of promises and complaints about his life with Rebecca. Such messages were coming more and more often, especially in the evenings when he came home. She took a sip of her cold coffee and grimaced. On the table lay a letter from the salon in Seattle offering her a position as senior stylist. The salary was 3 times higher than her current one, with prospects for career advancement and a clientele from high society. And she was still stuck in this hole, listening to a married man whine about his family problems. The phone vibrated again. This time Adam had sent a photo, the sunset over the lake where they had met yesterday. The caption read, "Soon we'll be able to watch sunsets like this every day." Kira snorted and put her phone away. Adam was becoming more and more insistent in his hints about a future together. Yesterday, he spent an hour talking about how miserable he was in his marriage to Rebecca, how his wife didn't understand him, how cold and indifferent she was. "I'm going to file for divorce," he declared, staring at the water. "I just need to choose the right moment." Kira nodded and smiled, but inside she was boiling with irritation. She had heard similar promises many times before, from married men in other cities. They all said the same thing. All swore to get divorced and start a new life. And they all stayed in their familiar marriages as soon as their mistresses started demanding real action. There was a knock at the door. A neighbor had come to borrow some sugar. Kira put on her usual friendly mask and invited the old woman in. As usual, she began asking about her life, work, and plans for the future. "Who's that man who comes to visit you? The tall one in the uniform shirt?" "A client from the salon," Kira shrugged. "He helps with small repairs." "Oh dear, be careful. He's married to the manager of the motel." "Really? I didn't know." After seeing her neighbor out, Kira returned to studying the letter from Seattle. Adam was becoming a problem. His attachment was growing, and with it, his demands on their relationship. Yesterday, he even brought up renting an apartment for them in a nearby town. Her phone lit up again. Another message. Adam wrote that he had argued with his wife, that he couldn't live like this anymore, that he was ready to leave right now. Kira rolled her eyes. She had been hearing this song for a week. Water dripped from a faulty faucet in the bathroom. Kira looked at her reflection in the mirror, remembering their last meeting. Adam had been particularly insistent, talking about love, about the future, about how they would live together. And she had been thinking about her ticket to Seattle, about her new job, about her real life, one where there was no place for melodramatic stories with married men. "Rebecca suspects something," Adam wrote that evening. "Maybe we should be more careful?" Kira smiled. His wife didn't just suspect. She knew. She could see it in her eyes when they met at the motel, in the way she sniffed the perfume in the hair salon. "Everything will be fine," she replied. "Just trust me." In reality, she didn't care. In a month, she would be in Seattle, building a new life. The small-town family dramas would be a thing of the past, just like all her previous affairs with married men. Adam continued to write long messages full of plans and promises. She replied briefly, supporting his illusions. Let him think she was waiting for him to take decisive action. Let him believe she was ready to give up everything for their love. And she would do what she did best: smile, nod, and pack her bags. After all, the big city was waiting for her, and there would be other men, other opportunities, another life. No drama, no promises of love until death. In the morning, she found flowers on her doorstep, obviously from Adam. She gathered the bouquet and threw it in the trash. She didn't need these gestures, just as she didn't need Adam himself with his dreams of freedom from a boring marriage. The Sanders garage hadn't seen such a thorough cleaning in a long time. Adam methodically cleared the space, stacking tools and old boxes along the walls. On the workbench stood a brand new stereo system, a gift from Kira last week. "We need room to dance," she had said, stroking the glossy surface of the device. Her smile was mysterious, as if she knew something he didn't. Adam paused to catch his breath and wipe the sweat from his forehead. Sunlight streamed through the dusty window, tracing uneven squares on the concrete floor. In one of them, a small metal object glinted, Rebecca's ring, which she had dropped a couple of days ago while looking for old photo albums. He picked up the jewelry and put it in his pocket. His phone vibrated. A message from Kira. She wrote that she had bought wine and snacks for their special evening. Adam smiled, imagining how they would dance in this garage, away from the prying eyes of neighbors. "Rebecca is working the night shift," he replied. "We have the whole house to ourselves." Kira sent a smiley face and a message. "Don't forget to check the lock on the garage. I don't want anyone to disturb us." Adam walked over to the door and jiggled the handle. The lock worked fine, an old but reliable mechanism. He had installed it himself a couple of years ago when there had been a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. He heard footsteps in the house. Rebecca was getting ready for work. Adam hurried out of the garage, closing the door behind him. His wife was standing in front of the mirror in the hallway, fixing her hair. "Decided to tidy up the garage?" she asked without turning around. "Yeah, I've been meaning to do that for a while." Her reflection stared back at him with an unreadable expression. Rebecca had changed lately. She was quieter, more pensive. Or was he the one who had changed, and she was still the same? "Don't stay out late," she said, buttoning her coat. "We have to get up early tomorrow." Adam nodded, watching her leave the house. Her ring rolled heavily in his pocket. Kira arrived as it was getting dark. She got out of the taxi with bags of groceries and a bottle of wine. She was wearing a new dress, dark blue and form-fitting. Adam helped her carry the bags to the garage. "It's cozy," she said, looking around, "and warmer than I thought." I turned on the heater ahead of time. Kira took glasses out of the bag and began arranging snacks on a makeshift table, an upturned box covered with a clean cloth. Her movements were confident and precise. "Are you sure Rebecca isn't coming back?" she asked, uncorking the wine. "No, she's working the night shift at the motel." "Wonderful." The stereo came to life, filling the space with soft jazz. Kira handed Adam a glass and leaned against his shoulder. "To us," she whispered. The wine was tart, with a bitter aftertaste. Adam took a sip and pulled Kira closer. She smelled of the same perfume that made his head spin. "You know," he said, looking into the dim light of the garage, "sometimes I feel like my whole life has been a mistake." Kira said nothing, only pressed herself closer to him. Her fingers slid down his arm, lingering on his wrist. "We can change everything," she finally said. "Start over. Just you and me." Adam nodded, not noticing the strange smile that flashed across her face. At that moment, his phone vibrated. A message from Rebecca. "Are you okay? You're not answering your calls." He quickly typed a reply. "Yes, just busy in the garage. Don't worry." Kira watched him, swaying the glass in her hand. In the dim light of the single bulb, her eyes seemed darker than usual. "Shall we dance?" she suggested, placing her half-finished glass of wine on the table. The music grew louder. They spun around in the semi-darkness between boxes and tools. Kira hummed something in his ear, the words of an old song about love and betrayal. Music was playing in the garage. Rebecca stopped at the front door, listening. Light filtered through the crack and muffled laughter could be heard. She had just returned home. There were almost no guests at the motel, and she had decided to leave early without telling her husband. The keys jingled softly in her hand. Rebecca hesitated for a second, then headed resolutely toward the garage. The music grew louder with each step, some old jazz tune. The garage door was ajar. Music was playing inside, the lights were on, and there were glasses and an open bottle of wine on an overturned box. Rebecca stepped inside, looking around. The space had been cleared, as if for dancing. A brand new stereo system was flashing in the corner. There was a rustling sound behind her. She turned and saw them, Adam and Kira, frozen at the garage door. Her husband's face was frozen in horror, while Kira looked at her with a strange smile. "Rebecca," Adam took a step forward, "you were supposed to be at work." "Obviously." She glanced at the makeshift table with snacks. "Decided to have a party? I think we should go." Kira tugged at Adam's sleeve. Everything happened very quickly. They rushed outside, the door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Rebecca rushed to the door and yanked the handle. Locked. Muffled voices and the sound of footsteps receding could be heard outside. Music continued to play in the garage, now a slow song about unhappy love. Rebecca walked around the perimeter of the room. The small window was too narrow to climb through. The second door leading into the house was also locked. Half-empty glasses glinted on the table. One of them was smeared with lipstick, dark red, the same color she had seen on Kira at the hair salon. Next to it lay the remains of snacks and an unfinished bottle of wine. The phone. Rebecca took her cell phone out of her pocket. She had reception, though it was weak. She opened her contact list, scrolling through familiar names. She stopped at her mother-in-law's number. Helen had always disliked her daughter-in-law, considering her not good enough for her precious son. But now that could work in her favor. Rebecca imagined how the domineering librarian would react when she found out that her son was having fun with a young hairdresser, locking his wife in the garage. Outside, she heard Kira's laughter, high-pitched and ringing. Adam said something in response, but she couldn't make out the words. Then the front door slammed shut. Rebecca looked at the phone in her hand. Helen's number was lit up on the screen, as if inviting her to press the call button. The music in the garage changed to something more rhythmic. I wonder what Adam is feeling right now, Rebecca thought. Fear? Excitement at his own audacity? Or maybe relief? Now he doesn't have to pretend and lie anymore. Muffled sounds came from the house. They were clearly settled in the living room. Rebecca imagined them sitting on the sofa where she usually watched TV with her husband in the evenings, drinking wine from her glasses, eating from her plates. Her finger hovered over the call button. Helen was probably still awake. She loved to read late into the night in her library. One ring and their little celebration of life would turn into a real nightmare. The sound of the TV being turned on came from the house. They had made themselves at home there, as if she didn't exist, as if she wasn't locked up a few meters away from them, in the garage, accompanied by endless jazz music. Rebecca pressed the call button. The beeps cut through the silence of the garage, mingling with the music. After the third beep, a familiar, authoritative voice came over the line. "Rebecca, why are you calling so late?" "Helen, I need to tell you something." Rebecca tried to speak calmly, even though her heart was pounding in her throat. She could hear Kira's muffled laughter coming from the house. There was a pause on the line. Rebecca heard the rustling of pages. Helen was probably sitting in her favorite chair with another book. What happened to my son? Of course, her mother-in-law's first thought was about Adam. Always Adam. "You know, it's a funny story. I'm in the garage right now. Your son and his mistress locked me in here so they could have a romantic evening in the house." The rustling of pages stopped. Rebecca could almost physically feel Helen tense up on the other end of the line. "What nonsense! What mistress?" "Kira Holt, the new hairdresser at the salon. Very pretty, about 26. From the sounds of it, she and Adam are in the living room watching TV." The music in the garage changed to something slower. Rebecca sat down on an upturned box that served as a table for their impromptu date. "Are you sure?" Helen's voice sounded unusually confused. "Oh, yes. I have a great view of the wine glasses and the remains of their romantic dinner. You know, they even bought a stereo system, especially for dancing in the garage." There was some commotion on the line. It sounded like Helen had gotten up from her chair. "I'll be right there." "Don't rush. They're obviously in for a long evening. By the way, Kira bought a new dress. Dark blue, very elegant. Your son always loved women with taste." "Rebecca," her mother-in-law's voice took on a steely tone, "give me 20 minutes." A burst of laughter came from the house. It sounded like something funny was on TV. Rebecca imagined them sitting on the sofa. Perhaps Kira had rested her head on Adam's shoulder, as she herself had once done. "You know, Helen, I always thought you were unfair to me. You didn't think I was good enough for your son, but it turns out he's not good enough for me." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Helen said curtly and hung up. Rebecca leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. I wonder if Adam remembers that his mother lives only 10 minutes away, and that she has always been obsessed with their family's reputation? Something fell in the house, and muffled laughter could be heard. They clearly felt completely safe. Rebecca looked at her watch. 5 minutes had passed since the call. The stereo changed songs again. Rebecca recognized the tune, an old jazz standard about betrayal and revenge. How ironic. She imagined Helen's face when she saw this picture, Her precious son in the arms of a young hairdresser, his legal wife locked in the garage like a useless object. What would win? A mother's love or a maniacal desire to preserve the family's reputation? She heard the sound of a car approaching outside. Rebecca went to the small window. The familiar headlights of Helen's car flashed in the darkness. 10 minutes. Her mother-in-law was clearly speeding. Rebecca leaned against the cold garage wall and waited. A few moments later, the silence of the night was broken by the sound of the doorbell. Everything in the house fell silent. Adam felt uncomfortable in his own home. Kira sat on the sofa as casually as if she had always lived there. Her dark blue dress contrasted sharply with the familiar beige upholstery, the very same that Rebecca had once chosen. His head was spinning from the wine. They brought the bottle from the garage, leaving the music on to drown out any possible screams. Adam tried not to think about his wife, locked up just a few feet away. Every time the thought crossed his mind, he took another sip. "Relax," Kira stroked his shoulder. "Everything's going according to plan." Plan. It was strange to hear that word. He had never planned anything like this. It had all happened by itself. First, innocent encounters at the barber shop, then coffee after work, long conversations about life. And now he was sitting in his own living room with his mistress while his wife was locked in the garage. Some comedy was on TV. Kira laughed, loudly, ringingly, not at all like Rebecca. His wife always laughed quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. Something was moving in his shirt pocket. Adam reached in and found Rebecca's ring, the one he had found in the garage that morning. The metal felt burning hot. "What are you thinking about?" Kira moved closer. She smelled of the same perfume that was now ingrained in his shirt. It's all so strange." "Come on," she waved her hand. "You said yourself that you were tired of this marriage, that Rebecca didn't understand you, that you wanted to start a new life." He had said that. After the third cup of coffee in their favorite coffee shop on the outskirts of town, or after the fifth. He couldn't remember anymore. The sound of a car passing by reached his ears. Adam tensed, but the sound quickly faded away. Music was still playing in the garage, muffled but discernible. "What do you think she's doing in there?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "What does it matter?" Kira reached for the bottle. "The main thing is that she's not here." There was a cold edge to her voice. Adam caught himself thinking that he had never heard her speak like that before. The TV was still on, but he wasn't watching it anymore. His thoughts returned to the garage. Rebecca must be freezing. Autumn evenings were cool. Maybe he should bring her a jacket or at least a blanket? "I know what you're thinking," Kira said, putting her glass on the table. "Stop it. She's a grown woman. She'll survive one night in the garage." "But, no buts. You wanted this, remember? You said you'd do anything to be with me." He really had said that. After that meeting at the lake when the sunset painted the water red. Back then, everything seemed simple and right. The ring in his pocket pricked him again. Adam took it out and placed it on the coffee table. The gold band glinted dimly in the light of the table lamp. "Is this hers?" Kira picked up the ring with 2 fingers, examining it. "It's cheap. We were young. We had just graduated from college." "And that's why you married the first woman you met?" "Rebecca wasn't the first girl I met," he said, the words coming out sharper than he had intended. Kira smiled and tossed the ring back onto the table. It clattered against the glass surface and rolled toward a vase of artificial flowers, another of Rebecca's choices. The sound of a car came from the street again, closer this time. Headlights momentarily illuminated the living room through the loosely drawn curtains. "You locked the front door, right?" Kira asked. "Of course." At that moment the doorbell rang. Loud, demanding, such a familiar sound. Only one woman rang the doorbell like that. Adam froze. The blood drained from his face, his mouth went dry. "Who is it?" Kira sat up on the sofa. "My mother," he whispered. The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Music was still playing in the garage, but now it seemed mocking. "Your mother? At 11 o'clock at night?" Adam stared at the front door, unable to move. He knew that ring. He knew what would happen next. If he didn't answer, she would start banging on the door. If he didn't answer the banging, she would get the spare key, the one he had given her just in case. The doorbell rang a third time, long and loud, as if someone was holding the button down. In the silence between the rings, Adam heard the key turn in the lock. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air and Helen Sanders. In her strict dark suit, she looked as if she had just come from the library, not rushed across town in the middle of the night. Adam jumped up from the sofa, knocking over his glass. Red wine spilled onto the light-colored carpet, the very one Helen had given them as a housewarming gift. Kira remained seated, only straightening her back and lifting her chin slightly. "Mom?" Adam's voice trembled, just like when he was a child and she caught him doing something naughty. Helen silently surveyed the living room. Her gaze slid over the half-empty bottle, the dark stain on the carpet, and the unfamiliar woman on the sofa. It lingered for a second on Rebecca's wedding ring, glinting on the coffee table. "Where's my daughter-in-law, Adam?" In the hanging silence, muffled sounds of music came from the garage. Kira adjusted the hem of her dress, a careless, almost arrogant gesture. "Helen, good evening." She smiled the same smile that worked on all the customers at the hair salon. "We weren't expecting guests so late." "And you must be the hairdresser," Helen said the last word as if it were a curse, "who not only cuts my son's hair, but also locks his wife in the garage." Adam turned even paler. His gaze darted between his mother and Kira, as if he couldn't decide who to fear more. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Really?" Helen took a step forward. "Then explain to me why Rebecca called me from the garage. Why is that creature sitting in my house? And why is your wife's engagement ring lying on the table like a useless trinket?" Kira stood up, smoothing the folds of her dress. Her movements took on a cat-like grace. She looked as if she were preparing to pounce. "Your son made his own decision. He was tired of this marriage, of this life. I just helped him realize what he really wanted." Helen turned to her. In the dim light of the table lamp, her eyes looked almost black. "Girl, do you even understand what you've gotten yourself into? Do you think you're the first person to try to destroy someone else's marriage?" "Mom, please." Adam took a step forward. "Shut up." Helen didn't even turn her head. "I'll deal with you later. Right now, I want to talk to this enterprising young lady." Kira smirked. "Talk? About what? About how your son complained about his marriage? How he said he only got married because you insisted?" A dead silence hung in the living room. Even the music from the garage seemed to fade away. "What did you say?" Helen slowly turned to her son. Adam backed away, bumping into the coffee table. A vase of artificial flowers swayed and fell, scattering plastic petals across the wine-soaked carpet. I didn't say that." "No?" Kira raised an eyebrow. "What about that night at the lake, when you told me how Mom chose the perfect wife for you, a modest librarian who would never get in the way of your career?" Helen paled. Her hand involuntarily reached for the pearl necklace around her neck, an old gesture Adam remembered from childhood. She always did that when she was truly shaken. "My boy," her voice became unexpectedly soft. "What did she do to you?" "I didn't do anything to him," Kira snapped. "I just showed him that life could be different, without constant control, without having to live up to someone else's expectations." "Different?" Helen smiled bitterly. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Do you think you're the first beautiful young woman who decided she could change someone else's life?" She turned to her son. "Adam, Open the garage. Now. But Mom, now. Adam flinched and reached for the keys. Kira grabbed his arm. Don't! You wanted to be free, remember? Free? Helen laughed, and there was no joy in her laughter. Girl, do you even realize what you've done? Do you think anyone will come to your hair salon after a scandal like this in our town? Kira turned pale. For the first time that evening, her mask of composure cracked. Are you threatening me? No, dear. I'm just explaining the consequences. In small towns, news travels fast, especially juicy news. At that moment, there was a loud crash from the garage. All three froze. Adam. Helen's voice was steely. The keys. Now. He obediently took the bunch from his pocket. Kira backed toward the door. I think I'll go. Oh no, Helen blocked her way. You're staying. Since you've decided to destroy someone else's marriage, be so kind as to see the show through to the end. The small-town police station was quiet. The officer on duty looked with interest at the unusual group, an elegant woman in a strict suit, a disheveled blonde in an evening gown, a rumpled man in a uniform shirt, and a calm, middle-aged lady. Rebecca sat slightly apart, watching Helen explain the situation to the officer. Illegal detention, threats, moral damage. Every word hit the mark. Her mother-in-law clearly knew how to present the information correctly. Kira nervously fiddled with the hem of her dress. There was no trace of her morning confidence left, especially after Helen mentioned that her friend headed the state licensing commission for hair salons. Adam sat with his head down. His school bus driver's uniform looked particularly ridiculous in the fluorescent light of the station. Tomorrow morning he would have an unpleasant conversation with the school principal. Helen had already called her to warn her about family circumstances. So you're saying you were locked in the garage against your will? The officer looked at Rebecca over his glasses. That's right. They were having some kind of date, and when I came home early, they panicked and locked me in. And they left the stereo on to drown out any screams, Helen added. The officer shook his head and wrote something down in his notebook. His gaze lingered on Kira. And how long have you been planning this situation? I didn't plan anything, she snapped. It was just a stupid joke. A joke? Helen raised an eyebrow. What about your plans to move to Seattle? The ones you told everyone at the salon about? Kira flinched. Adam looked up, puzzled, at his lover. What's Seattle? Oh, you didn't know? Helen smiled. Your girlfriend got a job offer at a prestigious salon. She was planning to leave in a month. I guess she decided to have some fun before she went. Silence fell in the station. Rebecca watched her husband's face change. Confusion gave way to understanding, then hurt, and finally anger. Is that true? His voice was hoarse. Kira shrugged. Did you think I was going to stay in this dump forever? For what? For a school bus driver going through a midlife crisis? Adam seemed to shrink in his chair. Rebecca felt a strange pang of pity. He looked as lost as a child who had just learned that Santa Claus didn't exist. I think you should consider moving out sooner than planned, Miss Holt, Helen said, adjusting her pearl necklace. I'm sure news of today's incident will spread quickly around town. The officer finished writing and looked up. Mrs. Sanders, do you wish to press charges? Rebecca looked at her husband, hunched over, aged overnight, at Kira, who had lost all her glamour and poise, at Helen, majestic and unyielding as always. No, she shook her head. I think a written warning will suffice. Helen turned sharply to her daughter-in-law. Are you sure? Absolutely. In the end, we all got what we deserved. The officer nodded and took out the warning forms. Kira was the first to grab a pen. Her fingers trembled as she signed her name. Adam signed after her without looking up. Leaving the station, they stood silently in the parking lot. Dawn was painting the sky pink, giving everything that had happened an unreal hue. I'll call a taxi, Kira muttered, taking out her phone. Don't bother. Helen smiled her trademark librarian smile. "I'll give you a ride. We can discuss the details of your departure." Kira paled but didn't argue. They got into Helen's car and drove away, leaving Adam and Rebecca alone. "I can explain," he began. "No need," Rebecca said, taking out her car keys. "Just tell me, is it true that you married me because your mother insisted?" Adam remained silent, and his silence spoke louder than any words. "I see," she nodded. "You know what's funny? I only agreed back then because Helen convinced me that we were the perfect couple." She got into the car, leaving her husband standing in the police station parking lot. In the rearview mirror, his figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared around the bend. The city library greeted Rebecca with the familiar smell of old books and the quiet rustling of pages. Nothing had changed here in the past 6 months. The same shelves, the same worn armchairs, the same stern woman behind the desk. Helen looked up from the catalog and smiled at her sister-in-law. After that night, their relationship had strangely improved. It was as if an invisible wall of unspoken words and pretense had come crashing down. "How did the interview go?" Helen put down the cards and pulled the cup of cold tea toward her. "I got the job. I'll be the manager of a new hotel in Portland. I'm sure you will. You have a lot of experience." Rebecca sat down in the chair across from the table. The library window overlooked the main street of the town. A yellow school bus drove by, driven by an unfamiliar man. "Adam called yesterday," Helen said in a matter-of-fact tone, as if reporting the weather forecast. "He got a job with a transportation company in Seattle. He's driving tour buses. I hope he's doing well there." "I think so. He says he met someone. She's a teacher." Rebecca nodded. After the divorce, she and Adam had had little contact, except through their lawyers and Helen. There wasn't much to divide. They had sold the house and split the money evenly. "What's the latest on our hairdresser?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. Helen pursed her lips. "She's working at that salon in Seattle. They say she's doing well, although after that incident with the license inspection, she had to run around to various agencies." The library reading room was empty except for an elderly man in the corner leafing through old newspapers. Rebecca remembered this place. It was where she had once met Adam, a shy young man who came to read travel books. "You know," Helen said suddenly, lowering her voice, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For trying to arrange your life. I thought I knew what was best for you." Rebecca looked at her mother-in-law. It was the first time she had ever seen her so vulnerable, without her usual mask of an authoritative librarian, without her mannerisms honed over the years. "We all make mistakes," she shrugged. "I could have said no back then, too." Outside, it started to rain, a light autumn rain. Passers-by opened their umbrellas and hurried to take shelter under the awnings of shops. The lights were on at the Locon hair salon. A new stylist was working there now, an older woman with kind eyes. "When are you leaving?" Helen returned to her usual tone. "Next Wednesday. I've already found an apartment not far from work." "Will you come visit?" "Definitely." They paused. In the library, they could hear the ticking of an old clock, the one Helen had been given for her 30th work anniversary. "You know," Helen suddenly smiled, "maybe it's for the best. All of it." "What exactly?" "That night in the garage. Sometimes you have to be in the dark to figure out where to go next." Rebecca stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. On Helen's desk was a stack of new books, novels, detective stories, travel guides. Life went on, bringing new stories. "I'll stop by to say goodbye before I leave," she said. "Of course, dear. And you know what? I'm glad you stayed my daughter-in-law after all, even if you are my ex." Leaving the library, Rebecca opened her umbrella. The rain was getting heavier, but rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance as if nature was putting an end to this story. Her phone vibrated in her bag, a message from the real estate agent in Portland. The apartment was ready to move into, and the keys could be picked up at any time. A new life awaited her, and for the first time in a long time, Rebecca felt truly free. She donated the stereo from the garage to a local nursing home. They say old people especially love jazz.